Welcome to the new and improved Trust the Buzz. Well, this is the Trust the Buzz segment of the Carolina Buzz. That's what I'm going to change it to. I haven't changed any of the channel graphics, but you're now listening to Carolina Buzz. This is the Trust the Buzz section where, of course, we're talking about the Hornets, and there will be a lot of Hornets talk because trade deadline is here, and the Hornets actually made a trade. Well, technically was it this morning? Well, I don't remember if it was 12 or not. I was asleep by this time, but we traded our 2030 conditional second round pick from the Nuggets to the Thunder for a 2029 Suns pick, and essentially, based on what Barbie Mark said, that trade was just so that because the Thunder had it if it conveyed a different way, so they wanted it if it had conveyed both ways, I think. So that's why they traded for that, and then for us, we just get a Suns pick, which I think is to help insinuate with the Jimmy Butler trade, because I think the Suns probably want some draft capital back. I don't know what we get in return. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I feel as though 2029 is when they feel like, all right, this team has reached its apex. We're thinking about trading Devin Booker. I'm pretty sure Kevin Durant, Jimmy Butler will be gone. Bradley Beal, of course. So that's where I think it's going, but we'll see. It's still really early. At the time I'm recording this, there is no news on that. But if you cannot tell by the thumbnail title in this video, in today's video, we're just going to be talking about who on the Charlotte Hornets are available. It's a lot easier to do that than to think about who we're going to trade for. I have a list of players I think we could trade for. It's possible. I try to be as realistic as possible. And the problem with being realistic is that you're like, team wouldn't do that, team wouldn't do that. And then we obviously see the Luka Doncic trade, or even the De'Aaron Fox trade to a lesser extent. There's no way, like, you would think that the Kings would get more. Like, they were able to trade, the Spurs were able to get De'Aaron Fox without trading Sohan, Kendall Johnson, Devin Vassell, Stephon Castle. Like, that's pretty crazy. So the NBA is unpredictable. I like to play it safe. If you want to come back and call me out and say, oh, well, you didn't say that, I'm just not. Because then the thing is, if I say, oh, we're going to make this big trade, I look more ridiculous as opposed to it's just me playing safe. So it's weird trying to guess trades. But if you kind of make content on that, you have to roll with the punches. But in this video particularly, we're going to be talking about who I think is available. It's the NBA. Didn't know Luka was available. Anybody could be available, but this is just what I feel most realistic. No order, and we're just going to talk about all the players. So first on the list, Cody Martin. I think Cody Martin's still available. I would say I don't foresee him being a player you would, if you're a team, you would trade for knowing he's injured. But I don't know. I don't know what his injury. I don't really know how injured he is. Is this something like, hey, look, we know we're probably going to trade you soon. We don't want to put you out there and get injured. We're actively taking calls. We're actively making calls. That's why we don't say, if you don't, if you move on to play, then you play. But we don't foresee you being here past the deadline, so we're just going to take you out. That could be part of it, and that's the weird thing, especially with the Charlotte Hornets. We've seen players, particularly on our team, be out, due to injury for anything but injury. So it's just really hard to speculate what's what. So for all this, there are some guys who are deemed injured. We're going to assume they're not really injured, or the injury's not as bad as it's led to believe. There's a lot of guys on here where you wouldn't foresee them playing anymore anyway, just because it is what it is as far as injuries. Like, it's like, what's the point? But anyway, Cody Martin, I think between him, Josh Okogie, and Josh Green, who, spoiler alert, are all on the list, I think Cody Martin is the more well-rounded player. He does a lot of things decent, a lot of things good. I've said plenty of times, and I might even said it in my last video, Cody Martin is the one guy where he's as good as whoever's around him. So when we're completely injured and Cody Martin has to run point guard, I think that's why he looks as bad as he does. He's not going to be able to be good when he's playing with Nick Smith Jr., Tajon Salon, Daquan, like guys like that. That's just is what it is. When we've had our lineup, even if we're still missing like two guys, three is where he starts to look bad. But even if we're missing two guys, it's like, I don't know, Cody Martin's a valuable player. But at this point, I'm just of the camp of, we have tried with Cody Martin and it just hasn't worked. It has not reached to where you want it to be. You get a younger Josh Okogie, you get a younger Josh Green, and while some people may not be, too happy about them, it's just we've seen it with Cody Martin. We've seen what he can do. We've seen, you know, how this experiment goes. Why not trade him, get some assets, and then make something happen after that? I don't think Cody Martin's going to be available for a pretty penny. I don't think any of our guys. Miles Bridges might be the only one, and maybe NSJ, and those two pretty pennies are two different things, which I'm giving away my list. But either way, they're not in the same vein, but I think they still might have some type of value. Cody Martin's just not going to give us much. I will say that a team will value having him, you know, guaranteed for next year. So that will, you know, we're not going to get nothing, but I don't think we're going to get what a lot of fans kind of expect, which is crazy because some fans are like, he's not good. Okay, but then why are we expecting a first round pick for Cody Martin? Like, it can't be both. But yeah, I think Cody Martin, I think this experiment's done. I do like what he does when everyone's healthy, so I wouldn't mind having him another season, but I just feel like it's run its course. Let's try to get some new people in here. Next is Josh Okogie. I don't want Josh Okogie to go, and I got some slack for that last night, saying like, oh, he only looks good because we're bad, or oh, we don't need small wing defenders. But I don't think what people understand is it's not as if we don't have Miles. Like, instead of saying Josh Okogie and Josh Green are too small to play defense, or they're not good and we don't need small defenders, I think we do. But we also need guys like Brandon Miller and Miles Bridges to step up defensively. I think Miles Bridges has. I mean, and it's not permanent. Like, he's just looked good these last stretch of games. But Brandon Miller, for sure, has not looked good. Has not looked good defensively this season before he got hurt. As much as you can say Josh Okogie and Josh Green may not be, you know, whatever. Some people say they're not even rotational players, whatever. I think that as of right now, what we have guarding the perimeter, we need guys like that. We saw what happened last year with Brandon Miller, trying to put him on guys like Dame, trying to put him on these like smaller guards, and we weren't able to do anything. Now we got two guys who can do it, and now it's a problem, and they're not good enough. It's like, okay, well, we're not going to go from where we were to the Golden State. Well, is that even a good example anymore? But we're not going to go from where we were to, I mean, the Houston Rockets, the Cleveland Cavaliers, we're not. It's just that simple. We're not going to go from point Z to point A overnight. So moving forward, I don't know what this team can do. I would love to have, you know, some even better perimeter defenders. But right now, with what we got, I think Josh Okogie is pretty good. I think he plays with his heart. Like, he has a lot of hustle. His three-point shooting is coming along. I know this is probably his best season three-point shooting, so it's not to say that it's permanent, but it's trending in the right direction. I do like some of the spacing he gets with the Hornets. He crashes the boards. He does a lot of things, but it's more effort, defense related, and he can get to the rim, and that's what we've been needing. I understand that it may not be, you know, a well-coveted pick, or a well-coveted player, but you have to understand that a lot of well-coveted guys are going to the Lakers. Well, you know, and I'm not saying the Hornets should settle for less. Definitely think they should be making calls to get some of these more coveted players in the league. But if you're able to get Josh Okogie for essentially nothing, because all you gave up was Nick Richards, and you got Josh Okogie and 3 picks, and he's not even guaranteed for next year, why not? You know, why not see what he got? And he started off shaky, but I think in the last few games he really showed what he could do. In this roster where we don't have the small, shifty guys, he fits that mold perfectly. But I do think that, in saying that, you know, he's injured for 3 weeks. He's a guy that a team would be willing to trade for, and that's essentially just because while he's out for 3 weeks, he's not guaranteed for next year. So if you're a contending team that just, all right, we need some wing defense here, and this guy that can shoot a little bit, it just has to be a threat. Josh Okogie's perfect for that. And then, not to mention, like I said, he's not guaranteed for next year. I forgot what the cutoff date is, but he's not guaranteed for next year. So you could easily just move on from him and try to pivot and make other additional moves. So I think that's why he would be well coveted by a team, even though he is on the injury list. Next is Miles Bridges. So he's probably the one that has the most, could get the most return. I don't know. I still don't know what that looks like. I mean, I saw people saying, well, the Hornets could do this because look what happened with the Lakers. Look what happened with the Kings. But those teams were, well, not the Lakers, but like the Mavs, the Kings, those teams were finessed. It's well known that those teams were finessed. Not every GM with players that are worth anything are going to allow themselves to be finessed. It's that simple. The Mavs, we finessed them last year. Our front office is first year operating. Well, isn't this technically the first year? Last year they made the moves, but they technically weren't in place. But they finessed the Mavs. The Mavs were finessed. Even from the get-go. Mavs fans tried to tell us they weren't. But they were. They were finessed. It has nothing to do with the fans, but that's the reality of it. Nico Harrison was finessed. Because we knew what PJ did. And as good as PJ was during that playoff run, it just dropped for PJ. And not to say, like, I still think he's doing well in his role that they have him in, but he's nowhere near to where they thought he was going to be that permanently. And we told them, PJ, didn't he score like 33 in his rookie? Like, he does that. That's what he does. He has games where that was why his time here was so frustrating, because he has games where he's on fire. And so I don't expect you to shoot that way all the time, but you know, it's got to be some consistency there, as well as his defense, his rebounding. And I think those things have gone up a little bit because of his role. It's like a lesser role, but it's an important role, but it's a lesser than what we kind of had him do here at times. So I think he's still playing well for, you know, what they want. At the same time, like I said, we finessed him. We got Grant Williams, who I think is a better fit for us. Unfortunately, he's injured right now, so that goes into it, like what you think of the trade. But overall, I think, you know, Grant is a bigger. We saw what happened, as well as the defense is still playing. We saw what happened when we initially lost Grant. We couldn't shoot. You know, we didn't have anybody to rely on in those corners like we did Grant. We didn't have the ability to rotate on defense. Mark Williams kind of helped with that just by being an anchor at times. I know Mark Williams, when it comes to one-on-one, I think he's a good anchor, but when it comes to one-on-one with big centers, he struggles. But still, in Grant, that's what Grant was for. So we're missing a lot with Grant. And we got a first-round pick, which is looking beautiful right now. So we finessed them. And then I think the Kings, like you look at that trade, they got finesse. There's no way you don't, as I mentioned earlier, you don't get Sohan, Castle, any of those guys. And you traded De'Aaron Fox. I mean, the biggest thing, I guess, is maybe it's expiring next year, I believe. So that player probably better be, but I think you still could have got a lot more from the Spurs. I mean, I guess maybe the Bulls are who gave up the asset in return, maybe. But still, I think you could have got a lot more from the Spurs. So I don't think that we can just go and make that trade. And some people say, well, are you saying that because we're the Hornets? No, I'm saying that because most GMs are not going to allow themselves to be finessed that way. If we're able to do it, masterclass by our front office. But I just don't see it. What Miles Bridges' return going to be? I do think it should be a first. He's that good of a player. Will the first be a good first? I don't know. Will the first be a soon first, like in the future, like close? Don't know. It would probably be a deep first. I'm not gonna lie to you. I still think the NBA. I'm not talking what whether right or wrong, doesn't matter. I still think the NBA is going to, if trying to make a trade for Miles, I still think they're going to hold on to his attitude, his issues off the court. That stays with you. It would have to take significant time before teams are like, okay, we can make this trade without having to worry about his off the court. I still believe the NBA will hold that against him. I mean, rightfully so, but still. So that's going to be a part of the negotiation. He started off rough this year, and we've already talked about it on his channel. I don't know what the future looks like for him and Brandon. I know a lot of people are talking about Brandon and LaMelo as far as how they played well together, or how they will play together. I really think the issues between Brandon and Miles, because both of them are playing out of position. Because you got Miles playing the 4 and you got Brandon playing the 2, and they're both threes. They're threes in different ways, but they're both threes. I think the beauty with Miles is that he can play the 4, but we know he's best at the 3. And while as much as basketball is becoming positionless, I think that having that freedom of being able to move around with the ball and whatnot, and his ability to ISO, his ability to get to the rim, I think plays well into him being a 3 more so than a 4. Because I think in this, as much as this positionless, I think he wants someone on the court to be a spot up, and it shouldn't be Brandon, which that's what it would require. And that's why I feel as though they don't play well together, is because Brandon shouldn't be a spot up. But that's what would work for Miles. Miles shouldn't be the spot up for Brandon, but that's what would work for Brandon. So that's where it gets a little shaky. This is their, technically second year playing together, but this is their first year kind of in these roles of, one, being in the offense, and 2, Miles said himself he expects a load of the scoring to go to LaMelo, Brandon, and him. So they're probably still getting adjusted, but that's just something to look out for. I think Miles gets you a first. I don't think it's a first from this year, next year. Maybe you start looking at the year after. I really don't foresee players being traded for Miles, at least not players of significance. We'll see. It's just weird, and you got to think about who would want him. I'm not saying that his talent's not wanted. It's more so about you got to think about where these teams are, who they already have, that thing. We can look into it and see who's trade partners for Miles, but I think the Hornets might just end up keeping Miles past the deadline. And we'll kind of zoom through these guys. See, I'm getting long here, but NSJ, I say pretty penny for NSJ, but I don't think it's going to be anywhere near as the compensation we'll get for Miles. I just believe that a team will buy high. I think that this is more of like your expiring good player, or maybe disgruntled good rotation player. Well, let's get something. So you get NSJ in a couple of seconds, NSJ maybe in a first, depending on who the player is. I think that, and then you get like I said, a role player who no doubt has a spot on this team in the future, or whatever this team ends up looking like. That's your return. I think that's a pretty good return. As I mentioned, it's not going to be a guy. No team is going to look at NSJ and say, "Oh, we're going to take, we're going to trade our well-rounded, coveted wing player for NSJ." It's going to be more so he's not coming back. We're not going to be good. It's going to have to take some type of situation like that. So we can look around the league and see who those kind of players are, but I think that's what it's going to take. And obviously you're going to have to add something to NSJ to get that. But hey, at the end of the day, I do believe that pairing NSJ with a pick of some kind, and maybe even another player, depending on what the team, it all depends on what this other team is. But I'm also not for trading NSJ. I think that one thing I really like about NSJ, and if we do decide to keep Trey Mann, which I hope we do, they can play together. What they do is different. Like, they kind of play the same position, maybe even the same size, but what they do and how they play the position are completely different. You can rotate them and have them, come in for each other. I think that's good. I think that's good. Like I said, this is not to say who I think should be traded. It's more about who I believe is available. I'm pretty sure NSJ would be available, but I'm not really looking to trade him right now. But we'll see in the future. Josh Green's another player who I can see being traded just because of his contract. Not that it's hurting the team financially. It's more so it's for a longer period of time. I think he still has 2 more years after this, 2 fully guaranteed years after this. So it's going to take some additional, maybe compensation, unless a team really wants to be happy that they locked him up like us. That's kind of how we were. I think Josh Green has been good for us, but you don't need Josh Okogie, Cody Martin, and Josh Green. You need you need at least 2. I say 2 of them. So if you're I could see Josh Okogie and Cody Martin fitting. Josh Green and maybe Cody Martin, but I don't know if you're going to. As far as who I want, I would say Josh Okogie, Josh Green. But if you're talking about having them be too close and too similar, I could understand that. So one of them would have to go if you're looking to keep Cody Martin. I don't know. So that's where it's more between those 3. It's more situational than it is value, what other teams want. It's very much more situational. So we'll see when that time comes. But Josh Green, I think, who's not going to want a guy that is good on the break. And that's another big thing. I think Josh Green also is as good as the teammates around him. If he's good at facilitating the break, he's good at like poking the ball and then someone else coming up and running up and getting it. If you have players who have that instinctness, who have that ability to rush and get the ball at that speed and then go on a break and then have him finish, it works out. But if you're doing that and then he's running with Micic, who may not can get down the court as fast, or maybe I think Micic gets a little dribble happy or trying to make like the spectacular play instead of the right play, then it makes Josh Green not look as good. So not to say he doesn't have faults of his own. It's more so to say, he's just as good as the people around him. And that's the kind of player he is. And that's the kind of players, the good teams need. A big part of that is staying healthy. I think one thing that we've looked at when we look at this roster, we have a lot of guys who they're only as good as who's around them. And when we're missing everybody, they look terrible. And unfortunately, you got to think about it as the Hornets. If you're constantly dealing with injury and you don't know why, because it seems as though they don't know why this keeps happening, then you need players who may not be too reliant on who's around them, who can create their own and do their own thing. Next is Daquan Jeffries. I think Daquan Jeffries will be more of like a a facilitator in the trade. I don't think a team is trading for him. I think it'll be more of a facilitator. Definitely could be useful for a contending team that, you know, that's way, you know, first, second, third, maybe even fourth. And towards the end of the season, they just need bodies to help rest their, you know, their main guys. He would be good in that. And then also, you're not too worried about losing games. I'm not saying Daquan Jeffries is some elite player, but having him, and then obviously you would keep some of your guys in rotation. I think that could work out for you. So that's why I have him up there. Mitchell is playing better. His shot selection, I think, is astounding at times. Not in a good way. He just takes bad shots sometimes. But I think a team that could use maybe even a tertiary point guard could use Mitchell, or a team that has other facilitators that aren't from the guard position but still need someone from the guard position. Mitchell can do that. And then, of course, lastly, a shooter will always be wanted, and that's Seth Curry. I think Seth Curry just has been really good as far as what we really got him for, which is stand there, shoot. He's been able to do that, and at times he's even started and looked good doing it. But on another team, it's just more so, hey, we need someone to shoot, come in and make a couple threes to either extend our lead, keep our lead, or catch up. And I think Seth Curry can do that, especially in the right lineups. If it can work with us, it can work with these better teams. So those are the few players. I mean, it's a lot. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 players I think are available. It's the NBA. Anybody's available. You know, depending on how the front office is, Mark Williams could even be available. As good as he's been at times, there are things that you would want him to work on to help be even better. So I can see them saying, hey, look, let's go ahead and before we have to pay him, I think next year they have to make that decision. So let's go ahead and move off him and look into the draft. And we have a lot of draft capital, so maybe we can move up and get another center. I don't know. My point is there's just anybody could get traded. Anybody. The only person I would say might be off limits is simply just Brandon. And as crazy as that sounds, it's not to say that kind of a lot of people about LaMelo. We don't know. I don't want LaMelo to get traded at all, but it seems as though at times that this front office, I don't know how much they believe. Not that they don't believe in LaMelo. It's more so they're not getting him the help he deserves. So it just makes me, as a fan, feel like, all right, there's got to be something there. Is that making something up? Sure. Because no one has said anything. LaMelo, of course, hasn't said anything. They haven't said anything. But it's like, I just saw Wemby get Chris Paul in the offseason. It was like, okay, that's a good guy to help him, especially in his second year. Just, you know, get some reps with a great point guard. You know, really dissect Chris Paul's mind and develop in that way. That's a great pickup. Then they went, and then they got De'Aaron Fox without still giving up Chris Paul. So it's like, I see teams like that. Hallie got help pretty quickly. Who else? Jalen Green even got help. I mean, as you know, Dylan Brooks is a defensive team player. Fred VanVleet was an all-star and a champion. And so he even got proven help. And then, of course, they built up their own guys. I'm trying to think of other players. You got to look at Darius Garland and Evan Mobley. They got Donovan Mitchell. They're like, okay, these guys are good enough. If we add a superstar on top of that, we're great. They did that, and then now look where that team is. So, and there's probably more. Jalen Brunson. In the time LaMelo has been trying to become, where the Hornets have been trying to become a playoff team with LaMelo, Jalen Brunson has went from a sixth man to a starter on a good, like a, probably I would say I don't think he went into New York being like the guy, but he became the guy in New York, and then they got him OG Anunoby. Josh Hart was already there, I believe, or they got him later. But they got OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, and Cat as help. So it's just frustrating because we haven't seen LaMelo get the help, and I don't know. I just don't know. And that's, you know, obviously videos for another day. But I don't know what to think of LaMelo right now. It could be straight up incompetence, and I almost would rather it be they don't think LaMelo's going to be here long term than to believe it's straight up incompetence, because that's much worse. At least the other way, if you're like, all right, we realize this experiment is just not going to go well, let's cash in on LaMelo, that would make more sense. It's like, okay, you at least have a plan, you at least have an idea. I may not feel it's the right idea, but at least you had a plan, as opposed to you just don't know what to do and you can't get him any help. Like that's more frustrating. But anyway, Anybody could be available. The only reason I say Brandon is simply just because they just drafted him. They're going to be attached to him. You might even throw Tejon in that, because they're going to feel like, oh, because I think any front office, especially year one, they're not going to want to admit that they picked somebody they're just going to, you know what I'm saying? Unless a crazy trade comes through. That's just more so. It's more about pride. I just don't think you're going to trade guys you just got high at that. All of, you know, Brandon and Tejon being in the top 7, top 10, whatever. Yeah, I don't think any of those guys you're gonna be looking to trade just off of pride. Teams do it, not to say teams don't, but I feel like that's more so. We knew we were gonna do that before. They drafted those guys with the intent of them staying here, so it would have to take a crazy trade for them to trade any of them. So that's just kind of how I feel. But you can, obviously, you know how this goes. You can feel free to feel different. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'm about to record another video because, as I mentioned, the beauty of me doing the channel like this is that you're going to get content daily. You're going to get a lot of content. It allows me to just do much more than just talk about the Hornets, because we know once the trade deadline's over, there's not going to be much to talk about. So doing it this way, it allows me to talk about the Panthers and Carolina and Duke and NC State and Wake Forest. Like, it allows me just to talk about so much more, because this is what I like doing. And I thought about doing an NBA channel, but my whole mission and purpose here was I felt as though Charlotte Hornets specifically were under, you know, appreciated, weren't covered the way I would like them to be covered. So to, you know, switch that to an NBA thing, I think that would be wrong. And I felt as though Carolina sports as a whole still needs to be covered. So I felt like, why not me? You know what I mean? So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.